Hey folks, welcome to another Snapp Tech podcast. I'm here in Berlin with my good friend Pier. We've been working together for a long time. Pier's a designer, been at Snapp for a long time. We've been touring the Android conference circuit together, talking about designer and developer interaction. And I would like to continue the discussion today about usability in open source. I think we ended up in a place in mobile that's kind of solved problem. It kind of interestingly, developers started to understand what the problem is. In early phases of Android, it was a little bit same what it is. And now it feels a little bit like we've gone backwards when we now move to open source software outside Android and outside iOS. Talk about servers and all of that stuff. We're moving to Nextcloud and things like this. So I would like to talk today a little bit about what usability actually is, because there seems to be a misunderstanding what it is. So some things I've read is either it's a subjective opinion, well, it's just your opinion that the UI is bad, or it's not supposed to be easy to use. It's not, meant for normal people. It's just for nerds, or usability is choice of colors, right? Yeah, and all of these kind of things. So there's a lot of level of misconception of what it is. Open source also has this very kind of fundamental problem that projects are usually started by developers for themselves, which that's not the problem. The problem is that they usually quite mature at the point when they become popular or relevant. Yeah. And to get usability right, you kind of need to involve usability design earlier in the process, but that's not possible. So I read a lot of scientific papers saying that the solution is just involve designers early. Well, that's not realistic. So that can't be the solution. There has to be some other solutions. So that's kind of the foundation where I would like to hear a little bit of your thoughts. And then, so what do you think if you talk to a developer of an open source project, where would you start talking about design and usability?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there are a couple of points on that. Definitely, it's true. Like sometimes you refer to design in general or usability as like everybody has a different opinion what design really is, right? I still keep hearing after, I don't know, being 10 plus year in the industry, like, hey, by the way, we have this idea or we have this sketch, can you make it prettier? But that's just not exactly like what design is. I think when we refer to, for instance, the user experience into digital products, I kind of like this metaphor of the iceberg, right? So sometimes you see only the higher level, the surface, which is of course like the color, the styling, the font, the typography. But of course, like there are a lot of other aspects below that, which are quite core to the whole experience. So for instance, like things like the information architecture, the content hierarchy, the content strategy, navigational pattern, those are all aspects that are quite important to the final experience. Sometimes they're not visible. People, tend to focus on the nicer level on top. But when you try an app or whatever software, a digital product that feel good, it's not just about colors and icons, right? So you need to get those things right in order to have a good experience. And I think all those are very important aspects to take in consideration. And when it comes to open source, I mean, I agree. Of course, like sometimes there are some situation in which maybe a project is started by a developer, or there are little resources, so it's hard to bring a designer in. Of course, like we talk about this in the past quite a lot, right? When you have the possibility to bring a designer and a developer together, that's where the most value is, right? Like two different approaches to this different type of expertise, these two functions that really work and collaborate together. This is where like great products are born. But if that's not possible, I think, it's important to advocate for usability, also like when you are focusing on the technical aspect, for instance. And yeah, maybe starting from there could lead to maybe a first version of the product that maybe still miss some aspects, but at least it's like on the right track to be scaled. And then, of course, like when you have more resources, then you can build on top of it, for instance.
So there's a couple of important points. So the thing that you and I spend a lot of time talking about is cooperation of or collaboration of two different disciplines, where when it's right, when it's done right, it's extremely satisfying for both sides of things. There's a professional software engineer, and there's often on the design side has this kind of impression that developers are there to track the design down, to drag it to reality and limit the ideas and so on. But of course, the reality is that in a good collaboration, the ideation comes from both ends. The solution space gets bigger and so on. And the same thing is from the developers. They just think that designers are there just to tear down all the good technical solutions and so on. And that's not true. When it's done right, it creates a good product. In open source, the problem is fundamentally somewhat different because there's just design doesn't exist, or usability thinking doesn't exist at all. And I feel that there's a big group of people, well-meaning software engineers, who do not know that software needs to be designed, or this kind of accidental user interface doesn't really work. I'm like a massive advocate of people understanding the concept of mental models. And mental model is not a difficult concept. It's not innovative, some great idea. Mental model is just a thing that we have in our head that we think how something works. And we have created the model of a thing. And especially in software interface, it's very important key, because there's just pixels and flat screen. There's nothing physical beside it. But if you think about the button, it looks like a button, and we create a mental model of it being pressed and something happens. While that's a very small aspect of the bigger picture when you talk about information architecture and bigger design aspects and so on. But this is one of those things that I wish developers would understand, that when they build a software for themselves, they usually think about the data very clearly, how this software works. And software engineers are very good at simulating software, algorithms and data structures in their head. So if they don't consciously pull themselves one step away from that one, they will end up building an interface that reflects that part. While for them, it feels very simple and intuitive to use because they have the correct mental model in there. What user interface need to do, it need to reflect other people, create a way for other people to understand how the software works. And other people will not get into your head about your data structures that you designed. Yeah. So you need to design an interface that tells the user how it goes. And I used another video as an example, saying a car steering wheel. We have this mental model of the car steering wheel. When you turn it, it has an axle that turns the wheels, and the wheels turn left. So we intuitively know how to use it because we learn to use it. But nowadays, that's actually not how it works anymore. There's this data going in there, and the motors are turning in there. But that doesn't matter. How it actually works doesn't matter, as long as your mental model corrects to the interaction that actually happens. So if you expect button to be pressed, and it actually happens that way. And that's the problem of the open source project, is that it goes too long by accidental interface design, and it reflects these data models, and that's kind of the thing.
Yeah, I think that's quite interesting. Like actually, one interesting aspect of good experience, or actually the job of good UX designer, it's actually find a way of somehow filtering the complexity of the system. And somehow translating this into an interface that feels simple and intuitive, right? Mm-hmm. So even if, you have a lot of complexity behind it, you have a lot of controls, settings, different type of data and so on, like somehow you should find a way to not translate one-to-one this complexity to the user, towards the user, but somehow find a way of filtering it. And we do this like in different ways, right? So Of course, like there are some known patterns. Like when we talk, for instance, about mental models, now we are I don't know, we are very used to gestures, for instance, on mobile side, swipe to back or pinch to zoom. Those are all kind of gestures that somehow resemble what we do in reality, right? So when you pinch to zoom with 2 fingers and the picture increases, just because like I've observed actually quite funny my daughter doing that on a tablet, and she just observed this once and she learned it because that's a fairly natural
My kids now
motor,
try to
right?
pinch the zoom TV.
Exactly, and then they start to try to pinch to zoom everything. But that's exactly like why it sticks, because it's like a natural model that we can reflect from the real world. But then, like when it comes to choosing the right patterns when building software, there are some heuristics, for instance, that could guide us, and we can adopt. So first of all, like we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time, right? So we have some good interaction patterns that almost come for free, and they are quite established now after 10, 15 years.
So you would say that when you use patterns that are known, that means that people can build on something they already learned. They don't have to start from beginning to learn the interface, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think we can use like existing patterns, definitely, that are quite established. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. And then, of course, like, there are some, I would say, like well-known usability guidelines out there that we can follow. For instance, quite famous one is like the 10 heuristics of usability and experience for Jakob Nielsen. All those things like making sure, like, let's say, that cover the foundation, making sure like system feedback, system status is always visible and present, user guidance, consistency, and so on. So I think we have the tools. We can reuse most of them. And then, of course, like every product is different. So in order to really understand how we can better serve our users, for instance, we really need to understand the user first. And here it comes the whole part about, making sure we have research in place, we have testing in place, really understand like other users. Because sometimes, as you mentioned, like especially in open source, those projects starts as personal projects. Sometimes you are the only user using your product. And I think as like the soonest we move past that point, so we start to put that product in the hands of other users, the better, because then you start to understand, okay, different target groups, different understanding of your app.
What would you say to a software engineer who tells you that usability is just an opinion? Like, I can use it, it's not my problem. The usability is just your opinion. What's the response?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. Like, it could be like, it could be like your personal opinion, but in the moment in which you want your product to be used by other persons, I think we need to cover some standards, right? Otherwise, you might end up being the only user on that product. And the same goes for other aspects like, accessibility and so on. Like, all those has to be covered because you are not the only user for your product. Sometimes, like another point where maybe like in open source project, like there is a little bit of friction is like since like at the beginning of the project there is so much focus on the functionality, for instance. Sometimes like those products are built for power users, or maybe unintentionally they end up being built for power users. And I think this is like where it's really important to consider like other aspects. For instance, how do you configure some parts of the project, like or the product, like is it good to front load all the configuration possibility up front, all the settings and so on? Or it's better maybe to use some progressive disclosure so that user get used to the product like slowly, without any barrier at the beginning, for instance.
I think so to me, 2000 or something like that. I was in university. It's a completely life-changing experience. I took a course about usability, user interface design in thing. I was already interested about that, but my background is a developer, so I went through this kind of life cycle of thinking. It's just opinion. And the genius of the people who run it in University of Helsinki, the teachers were fantastic for this course. So they made us, all of us engineers, they made us build an application, a software, piece of Java software at the point. And once we spent 2-3 weeks building that thing, they made us recruit a friend outside the project. And they set up usability lab for us, saying, here it is, here are the user goals you've designed, and here it is. Now ask your friends to do that. And I went into this event expecting to be just proven perfect. So, this user interface is freaking perfect. How would they not use it? It's perfect. It does exactly what I planned it to do. And my friend, and the good thing about it, you bring a friend there that they'd actually try to help you. And my friend was completely unable to do anything in software. I'm like, okay, I now understand why it's important to think it from, and that changed my career. That's why I, got into working with you and all of these kind of things. So I found it very, very important. And I think a usability test doesn't have to be an expensive or long process or anything. But there's some kind of aspects that you have to understand about usability before you start. If you just drop an app in front of, or software in front of somebody else saying, do something, that doesn't really tell you much. You have to have a bit of an understanding about user goals, especially what the user is trying to do. And very quickly, user goal is a definition of something user want to do without describing how it is done. So user wants to save is not a user goal. User wants the document to be there next time when they come back is a user goal. Because that's kind of the where you can then start talking about things like you define something with your software. User wants to send a message, and that's a little bit kind of there's a function in there. But you say user wants other person to hear this message, right? And then you describe them saying like, make your friend read the message you write, and then you put the software in there and say, okay, do, and try to observe them. And there's this technique called thinking out loud or thinking aloud, which is extremely powerful, complementary to this one, saying, ask your friend to, when they are a bit stumped or they don't do anything, it's like, okay, what are you thinking now? And encourage them to talk through their decision process and say, I think I should be writing, I don't know how to write the message, and this is kind of the very revealing thing. And then from that one, you can extract a lot of information. But I wish more developers would take one step forward. Developers don't need to become designers. It's a very difficult discipline to learn, and it takes time to learn. Not everybody can do that. But learning to understand that there's a need for designers, I think that's the thing that opens us. People should learn, because then they can invoke people at the right time. It really scares me that people think design is choosing colors or subjective, because it isn't. It really isn't, and that is blocking from projects becoming things. But try to figure out a way to observe other people to do tasks on your software, and you will probably learn a lot of things from that.
Absolutely, and I think actually like jumping into usability tests, it's quite a good way of learning that, because I still remember like the first time I tested a product, it was exactly the same, right? Actually, you're almost disappointed because you thought it through, but it's not true in the end. So and I think like with the time, actually you enjoy a lot also, like, and you almost expect, okay, now tell me like what I did wrong, right? Because you want to learn. And I think that's the whole aspect of it. And I also agree, like sometimes like you might think usability test is already like something for researcher, or you need to have a usability testing lab or a complex setup. It's not. Like, for instance, there are also a lot of events. There is one here in Berlin. It's called Usability Test Essen. Basically, what you do, they offer you a pizza, and then you bring your product, you sit on a table, and there are like 5 users who try your product. For instance, you give them a little bit of a guidance, you prepare a small script of what you want to test, and then at the end you learn, and at the end you take a slice of pizza and eat together. And it's very, very useful. I did it a couple of times, and it's also funny. So I really encourage like everyone to test their product.
If you're very brave, you can, if you build mobile applications, especially take your phone, go to a coffee place, find somebody who doesn't seem to be working, and saying, "Can I pay you coffee if you try that?" So, that's
guerrilla testing. There are a lot of possibilities. Exactly.
It's pretty cool. I want to talk to you much more about these things later, but I kind of think we spent quite a long time already. But kind of last question, might not be a very short one, but what would be your advice to somebody who have been building their own software for a while, especially in open source? They're kind of getting a little bit traction. There's a couple of contributors already from a developer perspective. What is the thing they could do? What could they do to improve the usability themselves? B, how can they get a designer involved?
I mean, that's a good question. Definitely, as we mentioned, they could start from some foundations. There is also, for instance, on the web, there is I think it's called usability checklist. It's quite extensive. Not every project has to go through all the points, but there are links to several resources in there, which could be quite useful. So you could just go there and check, okay, did I took into account accessibility? Did I took into account onboarding, for instance, or other aspects of a digital product? So you could start from there, just to have the foundation covered. Involving designers, I think, there are several ways of doing this. One is asking for help, for instance, in communities, on social, where kind of designers hang out. And I think this is like also an important aspect. I think it would be good and to involve more designers. I think the kind of open source kind of words sometimes, in the open source words sometimes, there have been like more developers than designers, and I think it's important to involve designers much more. It could be tricky for sometimes, because just for the way how you interact, like designers are used to maybe other type of tools, maybe there is a little bit of friction into collaborating via PRs and so on.
That's a big problem. It's like all the tooling is geared toward technical interaction. It's not possible to describe a usability issue in a Git ticket.
Yeah.
It's very difficult, at least.
I mean, you could also use like Slack channels and other type of communication tools, but I think that could be one aspect. But yeah, I think definitely like going out, asking for help, and then follow along, because I've also seen like sometimes designers kind of either get a little bit lost, or they feel like if they don't get like immediate feedback, like that they tend to maybe lose a little bit of interest or so. But if there is a possibility, I think there are a lot of designers who are happy to help.
I think that would be a good future episode to talk about exactly this, but from designers' perspective, like aim towards more design community, how to get involved.
Yeah.
Open source is going to be a very key role in the digital sovereignty of European Union or Europe in general, our kind of dependency of American big tech. We're going to go right now to a meetup with Nextcloud, for example. they have open source software, a lot of usability problems. There we can already start helping, but it's way beyond that one. When we start to build the next generation software to replace the big tech, it's going to be most likely open source, and we need to get everybody involved.
And I think it has to come from the bottom. Like in order to success, we really need to bring this communities together, with different levels of expertise and different level of functions. And I think only if we have really this kind of mix of expertise, we can succeed.
Fantastic. Okay, let's talk about that next time. So thanks for joining. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.